everybody, it's Christina from Card Making Magic. For today's video I'm going to be using Brusho crystal colours, and they come in a little box, and this is the 12 set. So when you open the box up you will have your instruction leaflet inside, and the colours are in little pots like this. Now they're all sealed down. You can remove the seal if you wish and scoop the colours out, but what I prefer to do is to take a pokey tool and just poke the top of the lid to create a sort of pepper pot effect. And then when I've finished with the colours, I just add some tape over the top, and that just stops any moisture getting inside. So this is the card that I'm going to make today, and I'm using the Sketchy Rose from Alt New. So the elements that I've selected from the rose are the large flower, I've got the leaf from the bottom, I have the little sentiment, and I'm going to use the stem. And for this I need some watercolour card. I'm also going to need some a spritzer. This is just clean water in a little spray bottle, and the colours that I wish to use. And I've got a couple of paintbrushes there. Now before I use the card, to make sure that there's no sticky fingerprints on there, I'm going over it. You can use either an anti-static bag, or what I'm using is just some talcum powder. And now we're ready to just stamp our flower onto that. So we'll just move these out of the way. And this is the rose now. So I'm making sure that this is all covered with the embossing ink, which is just a clear ink. And we'll add that to the card, and we're going to make sure it's all pressed down nice and firmly. And then we're going to add some silver powder to it. So we'll pop it onto a sheet first, and we'll sprinkle the embossing powder on. And then we can tip that off, and there's our rose. Now if you take a dry brush, you can just clean off any excess powder that's settled onto that picture. And then we can pop all this back into the little jar, and it's ready to use for the next one. Okay, so we'll heat that up now, and we'll repeat this process again with the leaves. So I'm going to stamp about 4 leaves on there using exactly the same embossing powder and the same embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat them all. So once you have your rose and it's heat embossed, all I'm going to do is just into the little petals and staying inside those heat embossed lines, I'm just adding some water. And I'm adding quite a bit. I'm sure you can see it shining on the film. So I'm going to fill the whole rose with the water, and it's just clean water. So once you've got that covered with water, you're going to take your crystals, and these are the purple ones that I'm taking here, and I'm just going to sprinkle them onto the rose. And it's very intense colour, so you really don't need a lot. And then at the top of the rose I'm going to sprinkle in some of the blue, and this is ultramarine. Now you can either leave that to do its own thing, or you can take your brush again, and we need it to be reasonably dry because there's a lot of water in that card, and all I'm going to do is just push the colour through the water onto the embossed lines. I'm not going outside the lines, and I'm not touching the powder outside of the water. So I'm just going to spread it around so that we get some nice shading in the rose. And then once I've done this and I'm happy with the way it looks, I'm just going to leave it to dry. Now if you're in a hurry, you can take a heat gun to it and that will dry it a little bit quicker. And the blue is very bright, very vibrant, very deep. Now, if you want yours paler, you can take your kitchen towel to it and you can just blot it off a little bit. And I think that's what we'll do with the blue. So we'll just blot it off a little bit. And if you look there, I've not quite got the colour up to the emboss line. So I'm just going to leave that now and let that dry. And while that's drying, we'll do exactly the same with the leaves. So we're just going to fill them with water. So I'll just do one and you're going to do exactly the same to all the others. Now with this one, I'm going to take some of the leaf green and I'm just going to sprinkle some onto the flower, and we'll pop a little bit of emerald green on as well. Now if you want that colour to be a little bit richer, you can spritz it again, or you can take your paintbrush to it and just spread the colour around a little bit. And again, if it's too dark for you, you can blot the colour off and you'll have a paler look. And once you blow, if you just blow on that, you'll get rid of the spare ink anyway. But I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to cut these leaves out and I'm going to cut the flower out once it's dry. So once your flower is dry and your leaves are dry, you're just going to take some scissors and you're just going to cut the flower out, staying as near to the emboss line as you can, but leaving it as part of the card. And then if you wish, if it looks a bit cloudy, if you take some clean cloth, you can just brush over that and that will bring the sparkle back to your embossing. So those now are ready to add to my card, and the next thing we're going to do is the background. Now for my background, I've chosen lemon and leaf green, and as I said to you before, they are very strong colours. Now there's two ways you can do this. You can either spritz the background first and then add the powder, or you can do what I'm going to do, and I'm adding the powder first. So I'm just adding little bits in little areas. Now you might think that there's nothing there, but you wait until the water is added. So we'll just add a little bit of green, and then all I'm going to do is just spritz that with a little bit of water. And I don't want it very vibrant, so what I'm going to do is take my tissue and I'm just going to blot that off. So I just want it as a subtle background for my flower. So now once that's dry, I need to decide which way around I want it on my card and whereabouts I'm going to add my flower. So I would like my flower at the top along there, and I'll pop the leaves in under the flower along there. So now I can decide where I'm going to add in my stem, and I'm going to pop my stem along the bottom here. So I've added a little bit more yellow to mine just to make the background a bit more vibrant, and before I stamp it, I'm just going over it with some talcum powder just to make sure that there's no moisture left in the card, because if I don't do that, then the embossing powder will stick to all the moisture that's on that card. So I'm just going to ink up my stem with some embossing ink, and I'm going to pop the flower in along there. So the stem needs to be along here. So we'll make sure it's all pressed down, and then we'll add in the embossing powder. Okay, and we'll make sure it's all clean around the edges, and we'll heat emboss that onto the card. So once I've got my stem heat embossed onto my card, I'm going to take leaf green and emerald green, and I'm using an acrylic block for this because this is another way that you can use your crystals. So I've only put tiny little bits down, and I'm just going to mix it with some water, and then all I'm going to do is just paint in the leaves, staying inside the embossed lines. And I'm just going to do that with all of them. Now once I've done that with the leaf green, I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm coming into the emerald green, which is a different shade, and I'm just going to add in some darker pieces on the leaves, and I'm going to do this to all of them. Okay, so come back and join me in a second when I've just finished these leaves. So there's my background and my stem finished. I've just added my little sentiment at the bottom. I'm going to mat and layer that onto some silver card, and then I'm going to add it to my base card. So I'm just going to pop some glue on the back, and then add it to the silver card. Right, and that just needs trimming off a little bit more at the top, so I'm just going to go and trim that off. So once I've trimmed that, I'm going to add some glue to the back of the main piece, and I'm going to add that to my white base card. And again, I'm going to press it down so that it's well stuck. And now I can start adding in the rose. So what I've done with the rose is I've put foam pads on the back, but because I want the centre part of the rose to be raised a little bit more, I'm doubling up the centre pad. So we can take the backings off, and we can just add this to the top of the stem along there. And then again with some foam pads on the back, just cut down the foam pads to fit. I'm just going to add in the leaves along the edge of the rose. So we'll add another one in there, and we'll add a third one, and we'll pop this in this way, just along there. So there you've got a really pretty card that would be suitable for any occasion, and no matter how much you do with these Brusho crystals, you will never get two cards that look the same. So here we've got the finished card. I've just added in some little pearl hearts along the bottom, and that's just playing with Brusho crystals for really pretty effects.